Hey, Roger.
Hey, Buck.
Hello, everyone. Ayn Rand's Objectivism and Steve Hoskinson's Organic Intelligence. Could there be a more glorious bridging project? In my opinion, no. My recent conversation with Gene Moroney has sparked some thought. I'm with Roger Atlas, who has an interest in both organic intelligence and objectivism. Roger's a client of mine, and he's been interested in organic intelligence for a year plus and has been a student of objectivism and philosophy for 15 years. Roger lives in LA. He's a mechanical engineer and has recently joined a tech startup focusing on AI applications. And he's an aspiring scientist, specifically a physicist. Let's get you there, Roger. When he isn't working on science and engineering projects, Roger enjoys writing and playing music, as well as reading philosophy. So, Roger, my chat with Gene Moroney has sparked some thoughts in you, and we're meeting to explore that together. Would you care to free associate?
Yeah, what interested me about it was how you guys seem to be talking about the increase of capacity with or without pleasure and what the um, consequences of one or the other would be. And that was something that I think you and I could uh, could explore.
Increasing capacity with pleasure, increasing capacity without pleasure.
Yeah,
Yeah,
specifically, Gene
yeah.
Maroney was talking about sort of breadcrumbing pleasure in as you embrace struggle, and the sort of donut principle came up, and I mean we'll get into that a little bit more. But I'm interested in that because there's sort of big picture implications.
Yeah. When so in my conversation with Gene, hi Gene, thank you for talking with me. Um, we talked about capacity at the beginning, and I was exploring with her how she understood capacity versus how I understood capacity. And I've been thinking about that since the chat. And then when we talked before this meeting, I've been thinking about it and I'm still thinking about it. So I'll say a few things about organic intelligence. Um, in organic intelligence, capacity refers to how much information and intensity you can process easily, as opposed to with discomfort, pain, emotional pain, stress. That's what it means in organic intelligence in its typical use. Capacity refers to what you can handle, what you can process easily, comfortably, pleasurably, at least on the whole. It doesn't refer to what you can handle with discomfort. And I sometimes in my conversation with Gene, I think sometimes she may have been using capacity in the way that organic intelligence understands it as what you can do comfortably, and sometimes maybe not, because she does refer to, well, there may be discomfort, but it's still in your within your capacity to do things. So I think at the outset there are at least two understandings of capacity on the table: the organic intelligence sense, which is what you can do comfortably, and then another sense, which is maybe more popular or assumed, which is what you can do. Can you do math problems for an hour and do laundry and cook and clean and hang out with your friends and go work out? Can you do that all? Do you have the capacity for all that? Even if it's uncomfortable and stressful and emotionally unpleasant, then you would have capacity in the more ordinary sense, probably, but not in the organic intelligence sense of what you can do comfortably. I'll just open with that simple thought and see if you have reactions to that.
Um, I'm not a expert in organic
Yeah.
intelligence, so I'm not really sure where the line of distinction is drawn over the term capacity, but I do know that there's sort of like there's a general focus on orientation, and then there's a general focus on pleasure. And coming from an objectivist perspective, uh, knowledge is taken to be empirical, and so the idea of relying on the senses uh, seems to overlap with organic intelligence because through the practice of orientation, supposedly you'd be more in touch with reality. Um,
Oh
so
yeah, no, true.
so yeah, so I mean the question of no pain, no gain is sort of another point of overlap between objectivist approaches and organic intelligence approaches. You know, obviously in the sense that we both schools of thought would seem to shy away from a no pain, no gain mentality if taken with a capital N. So I just think
Yeah,
about
yeah.
I think about um, I think about how you can choose to embrace struggle by breadcrumbing the struggle with pleasure and thereby facilitating orientation, and then thereby um, doing so on the basis of adhering to reality. Um, and in that way, it's sort of like an increase in capacity. And that
Mm.
would be sort of an argument against the capital N, no pain, no gain. That if it's all stick, as David Goggins says, that's actually antagonizing your ability to function. That's not helping you. And I've heard you in some of our dialogues we've talked about, and I've heard you talk about how I think even in that discussion with Gene that um, you do better when you embrace pleasure. And so that's to me where I was
Yeah.
interested in understanding.
Could you give, yeah, no, could you give an example? You referred to uh pursuing struggle or facilitating struggle with breadcrumbing pleasure. Are you able to give an example of that?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So there's like a Nike aphorism to just do it, um, which is often a substitute for how do you do it? And even if we're to be kind of eccentric here, why should we do it? So, like if you're learning music, I mean, I really grew up playing a lot of music. You might have to rehearse a lot of rudiments and certain kinds of out of context drills, and you don't really understand why you're doing it. And in that particular case, it obfuscates the how. If you're not clear on the context into which the rudiment would be implemented in a song, you don't really know how to string it all together to where you're building a repertoire. Now, music is more less of a kind of utilitarian thing. But to me, why I think it's helpful now that I'm so immersed in STEM and stuff is I remember having to rehearse playing really fast 16th notes over and over and over again. It's just, you know, really, really fast notes over and over again with the same movement. And the just do it mentality never clarified the technique that would make that kind of motion fluid and possible. I would always like stiffen up. And then it wasn't until I looked up a how, like a theory on the way you hold the stick and understand the way it rebounds as you hold it, like another the cause and the effect that this was able to be done. So this sort of just do it disciplinarian approach where you just sort of embrace the struggle with no breadcrumbs, where you know the how and the why would be the breadcrumbs and the just do it would be the struggle, was actually rather antagonistic to performance. And so that's an example of how pleasure can increase performance because it involves rational, deep rational values, as Jean might put it. She has a whole table on deep rational values, namely clarity.
Yeah, Jean has a major idea she advocates is value orientation. And I've been thinking about eventually talking about or writing about value orientation vis-a-vis the organic intelligence pleasure orientation, something on for the future. Um, you said you referred to being told how to do something and why to do it, grounding it in rational value, for example. being told how to do, being instructed how to do something and why to do it, I think you associated that with pleasure or bringing in pleasure, but
Yeah.
I don't see the connection because you could be told how to play piano or play guitar or etc. You could be given precise instructions, um, and a why. Maybe, well, let me just stick with the how for now. You may be given the how, but you may just hate playing piano. So why would how? It seems like the how is connected in your mind with pleasure necessarily, but it just seems orthogonal, right? To me.
Well, okay. So, I mean, I'm making assumptions here. I'm assuming that you're not being tyrannized by some sort of tyrant who's forcing you to do stuff for their own, um, um, ego or something. But like if you're actually trying to do something that you want to do, and you're just encountering the typical kind of discipline that you might encounter in any skilled endeavor where there's kind of a hierarchy, um, the attitude you'll get is sort of one of the Mr. Miyagi, like just kind of trust me, it's not going to make sense at first, just do what I tell you, and you'll be better off for it. And any sort of attempt to understand it is going to be interpreted as lacking in discipline, or can be. I'm generalizing. I mean,
Oh, interesting.
and
Yeah.
and and so I associate the how specifically with cause and effect, and that's sort of like a take what you want to pay for, take what you want and pay for it. The causality versus duty mentality. Um, so if you understand the how, you see the value bearing, and that's why there's pleasure associated. Now I'm assuming that you're actually going after a genuine value, and then when it's shifted out of context becomes because it becomes arbitrary in the way that it's being communicated to you. That's um, kind of where the negotiation arises. But again, like all bets are off if you're just sort of you got some tiger mom over you forcing you to do something that you hate, and
Okay, no, yeah. So we're assuming there's something that you want to do that's enjoyable, learn a piece of music. I just assume that it could be that parts of the process of learning it could be unenjoyable. Like, for example, like change example, you want to start a bakery. Your dream is to start a bakery, but there may be a million things unenjoyable about it, like accounting or I chose an example above my pay grade, but there may be 1,000 things in starting a business that you don't enjoy, even though overall it's something that you want to do and will bring you a lot of joy. So that was the context. So that's a rational context, right? Having to do a bunch of things you don't enjoy.
yeah. But the issue is,
Yeah.
do you position those issues of struggle, the things that you don't enjoy about a bakery, in the context of some positive value for the sake of like I don't know, energy recruitment? Or do you just keep it compartmentalized into this realm of this is just what you have to do, so just do it and force yourself to do it? And is that going to, you know, as a function of discipline, make you tougher and then thus make you a better baker? Or is that going to just alienate you because you're no longer seeing how this is integrated into the bigger picture?
Yeah.
But
Hmm.
well, I mean, in the context of the dialogue you were having with Gene, um, it was sort of the other way around because there there might have been some value that wasn't particularly attached to anything cognitive like the donut or whatever else, and then that seemed to be where the the issue of capacity arose, and it specifically like if you start to think through the donut, it depreciates in value. It's no longer enjoyable, and I think that's the argument you were making.
Wait, if you want the donut, then
if
it's no more.
you if you think cognitively, if you start thinking it through, it no longer becomes something kind of simple and just physical that you're enjoying the donut. It sounded like you were making the argument that there are sort of different levels to this, and
Oh, can I repeat the context to make sure that we have the same context? So Jean was giving an example of she has a task that she finds unpleasant, which is cleaning out her email inbox, right? And then I said, okay, Jean, suppose you're about to do the task, but you feel like having a donut. my point in asking her that, by the way, was just to
Mhm.
get her to explain to elaborate on how she does life concretely. Like, how do you make
Sure.
decisions? You have an agenda of cleaning out your inbox, but then you suddenly want a donut, and that's more pleasurable.
Hmm.
What do you do? First of all, am I getting you right that that's our context? That's
Yeah, that
okay, right?
seems.
Yeah, yeah. And then she replied saying she would, I don't remember exactly which side, but do she would engage in thinking, a lot of thinking,
Hmm.
pause. Okay, I feel like I feel like having a donut, but the task I have set myself to do is this unpleasant one of cleaning out my inbox. I'm going to think about my values to my memory. I'm going to think about my values in order to motivate me. I think to my memory to motivate me and get me to focus on cleaning up my inbox instead of having the donut. I believe that's what she said.
That seems.
Okay, and then my thought is, when would do you ever have a donut? Do you ever do what you feel like doing? I know she has certain health situations where she can't have it, so maybe a bad example for her specifically,
Hmm.
but do you ever feel like, Gene, do you ever feel like doing do you ever do what you feel like doing? Do you ever, I feel like doing this, so I'm going to do it. I was exploring that because from an organic intelligence perspective, it's a very positive thing to be able to just do what you feel like doing and do what gives you pleasure. And then I also said to her, I said, that's a lot of thinking, Gene. And then she reacted, yeah, that is a lot of thinking, Bach. And I said, what if I don't want to do that thinking? And then she said, Bach, are you advocating emotionalism? And then I said, well, no, no, I'm saying I believe in guiding yourself by reason,
Hmm.
and that it's a rational thing in life to follow what you want to do but go by that. You can go by feeling like, I was going to do this, cleaning my inbox out, but I feel like having a donut, so I'm going to
Hmm.
do it. And going for pleasure may be a crucial way to value pleasure,
Hmm.
which may be important if you don't value it enough. And Jean did recognize that. She said, yeah, that really prioritizing pleasure and comfort could be an important antidote for people who are under the sway of no pain, no gain.
Hmm.
So I'm not sure if I'm answering I'm not sure what your question was, or if you had one. I just kind of spoke free association wise. And it's in the air. I think Gene and I are pretty aligned in a lot of things. I'm not sure exactly where we would disagree. I mean, it was only, it was our first public conversation,
Yeah.
but I think, okay, here's one thing I would say. To develop capacity, it's important to have a lot of room in life where you can just chill, not have to do something. You can go by feeling. If you feel like having lasagna, go for it. If you feel like having a donut, go for it. If you had a task you were going to do, laundry, inbox, homework, and you don't feel like doing it, maybe don't do it. Just do something else. Now, if following feeling and prioritizing pleasure is causing serious harm to your long-term plans, okay, then maybe you have to bring in some willpower. But it's a worthy goal to be able to build in chill, prioritize pleasure,
Yeah.
do what you feel like, instead of being on the premise of I have to plan and structure and really focus and not, I can't like let the fat spread. Yeah.
What do you mean by let the fat spread?
I mean, relax, have a donut. Uh,
Um,
you don't feel like doing laundry right now, don't do it. Right.
so I mean, to me, what I'm taking away from that kind of gets at the heart of why, as a valuer or somebody who's shopping for values, I was attracted to both organic intelligence as well as Gene's approach, namely that uh, you're describing freedom, really. Like you're saying that you're well adjusted to where you trust yourself. And so if you want the donut, you go for it because you see it as accountable. It's already been thought through. You don't think that you're going to indulge in such a way that you're going to wake up dead the next day. or gravely injured. And so that just sort of speaks to how being accountable or being well integrated, um, as I think that objectivist philosophy would argue for in an ethical sense, serves you well. The thing that I think was interesting about the dialogue between the two of you was that you were sort of hashing out where um, the concept of organic lies with relation to, I don't know, roughly put discipline, I guess. The term discipline was not brought up by Jean, but I'm labeling her position as that. I hope she forgives me. But and like, because to me, the connection that I'm drawing here is that uh the concept of organic, and again, I don't totally have any expertise on this as a term of art in the context of organic intelligence, but just as somebody who's shopping for values, what attracted me to it was sort of there's a sort of notion of organic when you think about the free market or something, right? Like if you introduce controls, you distort the price mechanism, and as a result, an allocation of scarce resources isn't achieved, and then as a result, you have scarcity, or not scarcity, you have as an attempt to avoid scarcity, you have shortages, and there's like a cosmic irony of that.
Mm.
So if you sort of apply that to the concept of a single person's value hierarchy rather than an entire economy's value hierarchy, there's a real value to be had in being so well integrated that you could indulge the donut without putting too much thought into it. And that again gets back to the idea of skill development, whether it's a bakery, a musician, or science, is that if you understand the how and the why in an organic way to where there's no conflict between discipline and pleasure, then maybe you have a leg up on the sort of utilitarian tiger mom who's only interested in defeating everybody and winning the rat race.
Yeah, thank you. So, yes. So objectivism, the philosophy of Ayn Rand, is against acting on whim. It's against doing whatever you feel like when you feel like it with no further thought. It's explicitly against that.
Hmm.
And it's against that on the grounds that it's self-destructive. If you just do what you feel like whenever you feel like it, you're going to end up uh, too much drugging, too much alcohol, STDs, gamble your money away, never figure out a long-term plan, no retirement savings, your friends are toxic, who knows? I mean, just et cetera, et cetera. So you cannot just act on whim or your feelings. You have to use reason to identify your nature, the nature of the world, identify values that will promote your long-term happiness, and go by reason as opposed to whim or feeling now. And in my example with, I think when I presented to Gene the example, like, what if you feel like having a donut instead of cleaning out your inbox? Some might think, some especially objectivists, some some might think the donut would be acting on whim, and then the inbox would be the rational action. And I'm saying inorganic intelligence would be saying not so fast. It's very much to your rational self-interest to try to align. Okay, wait. So your whims or your desires of the moment, your feelings of the moment would be what's organic, like organically arising. Like I feel like having a donut, right? And then many objectivists would say, and objectivism would say, you can't just go on what's organic. You have to use your mind to control your behavior because you don't want to just kill yourself with donuts or drugs, etc.
Could I
Okay,
ask you a question about that, or go
uh,
ahead? I didn't
and then
mean
let
to
me finish
interrupt.
one. Let me finish one.
Yeah.
Okay, so and I agree with that. I mean, I'm an objectivist. I mean, the best thing in the world is objectivism, and the second best thing is organic intelligence. So,
Okay, I won't tell
um,
anybody who said that.
wait, you won't tell who?
I was just kidding. Being
Okay,
silly.
so, but at the same time, organic intelligence would say it's to your rational self-interest to align what's organic as much as possible with what furthers your well-being so that you can have freedom to just act. I feel like going for a walk. I feel like having a donut. I don't feel like doing my taxes right now. I don't feel like washing the dishes right now. Because the more you can, the more that organic impulse, sir, that acting, the more you have organic impulses that point you towards well-being, and the more you can act on organic impulses, those specific impulses, the easier and more pleasurable your life will be. And those organic impulses function as the compass for values. Rand does say pleasure is a guardian of your life. The sensation of pleasure is crucial to track. And I think that organic intelligence would say organic with these organic you want to track pleasure so that you can track these organic impulses that direct you towards your well-being. So organic intelligence is against whim worship, emotionalism, acting on impulse, and for reason to control your behavior. I'm 100% in agreement. I think that's true. And I'm sorry if I'm repeating myself too much. And reason would dictate that there's a major value in aligning your organic impulses or your whims as much as possible with what would promote your long-term interest. Okay.
So I think I'm glad you fleshed that all out because it really sort of tracks with the question I want was wanting to bring up earlier. Um, so I think that because there are so many different concepts at play and considering one's life and all of the different dimensions of one's life, there's room for ambiguity as to how you apply a concept in theory into practice when you specialize. So that's really what's so valuable about watching uh, you and Jean discuss this because in my rough sketch here, I'm sort of assigning her the role of the person who's specializing in the topic of discipline, and you as the person who's specializing in the guardrails of pleasure, as you were describing it, at least in that one conversation.
Okay.
And uh, I wouldn't, from an objectivist perspective, I mean, the benefit of watching two objectivists who are specializing in non-philosophic topics like psychology or something talk about this is that where there might be a temptation to engage in a false dichotomy, there's less likely for that to occur because supposedly we've got these dichotomies resolved at the philosophical level. So that's why it was an interesting thought experiment to watch play out with the donut discussion. Now,
Yeah.
so um, trying to bring it back to the original question I was trying to ask. Um, so you said, okay, so your kind of working definition, maybe this is more formal than that, but I took it to be a working definition of organic and the range of the moment emotion that you're describing. Um, uh, I was originally going to ask about, well, can something organic be long range? Because supposedly you would want that. Um, you would want your emotions to be calibrated to your principles because it would seem to me that some of the long range values that you have to act on the behalf on in some systematic or uniform way would be at risk of being over intellectualized and drained of their emotional value, which was, I think, the purpose of you drilling on the donut thing is you're saying is if you get so intellectual with this, you lose touch with the with the vivid and emotional or pleasurable capacity of enjoying something. So I mean, there's a couple of different default layers I could think of this in terms of, but again, like the thing I tend to think about is um in a capitalist country, which we don't live in exactly a capitalist country, but in more or less a capitalist country, relatively capitalist country where you have to put in the work and expect to get out proportional results. Um, you have to plan long range and you hope that those values that motivate you in the moment to make that commitment are reciprocated over time. So you hope that that in the same way, like economically, you allocate scarce resources for the most efficient um, way of resolving scarcity. That happens in your own life, and you don't want it to just be by rote that you follow through on something. You want the emotions to be following you and breadcrumbing the struggle. Otherwise, there's going to be long spans of time where you're just utterly miserable. And there are other sources in society, like other voices. I mentioned David Goggins, who, like many others, I really admire him, but he talks a lot about this sort of like old stick mentality. And it's worth mentioning, since if you're going to bring this up, I'm going to bring it up, is I mean, his all stick is having to do with a worthwhile goal. Like, he's not all sticking something that's miserable and lame. He's something that's kind of epic, like being a Navy SEAL. So it's interesting that somebody who's so accomplished would have a psychology or a relationship to his top value in life that's so harsh. But anyway, I only use him as an example because he's achieving such a high level of discipline, and I just wonder um, if it necessitates the absence of pleasure.
According to objectivism, the only achievement worth achieving is your happiness. Ultimately, that is the only achievement worth achieving, your happiness.
But wait a minute, isn't that a little circular? Because happiness, isn't that defined as achieving your values?
Well, um, yes, and your values have to be determined by what promotes pleasure as a that's a crucial criterion. I mean, you have to do what you enjoy, and the enjoyment and the achievement of the values that are selected by pleasure is the path, as opposed to achievements in any other sense, fame, money, uh, uh,
But would you say that pleasure and joy are the same thing, or would you say that joy is something else that is related to pleasure? And because
so
I tend to think of them as, well, I interrupted, so I'll let you
well,
go.
they're separate, and they're separate in Rand's thought. So Rand says there are two fundamental sensations, pleasure and pain,
Hmm.
and two fundamental emotions, joy and suffering, and they are guards. That which is pleasurable and that which is joyful point you in the direction of successful living. Now, if you have self-destructive beliefs like the right thing to do is to sacrifice my happiness for others, and then you get pleasure when you sacrifice your money or time because of that belief, but it's intertwined with the emotions from self-destruction. You're giving up your values, you're giving up your money, and there's loss to that. Then you have to, there's a work of getting the right, correcting the belief so that your pleasure and joy don't point you in self-destructive directions. But on the whole, the pleasure, and with pro-life philosophy, pleasure and joy point you in a pro-life direction. So whatever achievements you're aiming at, learn a piano piece, become a physicist, run a marathon, should serve your happiness. Now,
Okay, but
you suggested that I was being circular. You suggest, let me just continue a little bit, and then
sure, yeah.
suggested that, well, happiness is just the state that proceeds from the achievement of your values. Yes, Ayn Rand does define it that way. Yes, true. That does not imply that the selection of values is somehow independent of what gives you pleasure and happiness. I
Yeah,
mean,
I wouldn't say it did. It
right,
is.
right, right. So now, according to organic intelligence, it's crucial to have very strong access to pleasure so that you're more likely to choose values that actually serve your happiness. If you have a compromised access to pleasure, it's more likely you'll choose a goal more or less dogmatically, say, well, that's the worthwhile goal, so I'm going to go for it no matter how uncomfortable. And that's your path. But because of the compromised access to pleasure, so everything is pain and discomfort. So it's just worth it to you to go for some to keep going with pain and discomfort because of a compromised access to pleasure. Really stabilizing in pleasure and orientation is important groundwork for just being able to I feel pleasure, I feel pain, I like this, I don't like that, and that's the ground from which to identify your likes and dislikes and values and build values and form purposes. You have to have strong access to pleasure.
So, I mean, you mentioned guardrails. That's something that's always intrigued me about the objectivist perspective. Um, Now, I also wanted to invoke the concept of joy as opposed to just the concept of pleasure. And I mean, uh,
Yeah.
and so I also mentioned Goggins. The reason why I even discovered him was because I was listening to Andrew Huberman, the neuroscientist. Again, as a guy who's just shopping for values, I'm always shopping for the how of how these values function, like the causality involved. And so
Yeah.
was interested in the neuroscience and the Goggins conversation, um, which could be interpreted as the drill sergeant mentality, literally, as he talked about the all stick thing um, was discussed in the context of the anterior midcingulate cortex, which is a part of the brain that apparently gets bigger when you do things you don't want to do. Now, to me, the value in that, because red flags go off in my head when I hear something like that, but we're
Like
good.
what? Red flags go off in your head when you hear what?
Well, just kind of going back to the just do it mentality. Here's this incomprehensible thing, and you don't
Oh,
understand why you're doing it. The opposite of the guardrails, just dogma, basically. So, but okay, so there's something that you want to do, and unlike, eating a milkshake or eating lasagna, which is mostly pleasure, there's pleasure, but there's also joy. Like you're experiencing joy when you hear "O Fortuna" by Carl Orff or something, and there's a hell of a lot of skill that goes into both interpreting and enjoying it as well as performing it. And so there's a lot of long range um, orientation that has to be invoked in order for you to pursue that value. And that's where the joy comes in. So when I think about freedom, and again, I'm kind of drawing a connection on the personal level between freedom and the notion of being organic. Um, I think about you're accountable to the facts of some value such that you're free to indulge it. You don't feel like you're gonna go off the rails because you're well adjusted to it. So when you think about something like the anterior mid-cingulate cortex, I did a little bit of research on it after that episode. It's what he's talking about neuroscientifically, I guess, according to a PubMed article, is that it helps you handle the allostatic load. It helps you allocate energy in a way that you wouldn't otherwise know how to allocate that energy if you were just focused on doing things in the flow state, I guess, with the prefrontal cortex or whatever. Like if everything was falling into the categories as you've understood it, you would just do it that way. But because it's something you don't want to do, it's flouting your expectations. He also talked about it in the context of the stress as enhancing mindset. But the point is, it's hovering around this idea of no pain, no gain. And it's because it might be baffling, it might be confusing, it might, again, defy your expectations. You might not get exactly what's going on or see the value in it in the short range. It causes your brain to sort of recalibrate and handle that energy. In other words, it alters your capacity. It grows your capacity if you do it in without embracing one side of a package deal that's unnecessary, the all stick stuff. It
wait, what grows your capacity? Practicing your instrument even when you don't want to, instead of having lasagna. Is that an example that you're alluding to?
No, I mean, I mean, maybe, but that's a little bit too compartmentalized of an example. Just broadly speaking, this concept of the anterior midcingulate cortex is this part of the brain that gets bigger as it facilitates your actions when you don't have the motivation to do it.
Well,
So we have sort of a need to like a need to parse out where the redeemable part of this is in the all stick mentality, versus the part of it that's, just sort of dogmatic, or what we might call intrinsicism, or the no pain no gain stuff. And that's sort of where that's a sort of neuroscientific interpretation of what I saw at play in your discussion with Gene, about um, mediating pleasure versus embracing struggle.
I'm challenging your, I think I'm challenging your epistemology here. You introduced um, neuroscience and concepts in that field. Um, yes, I've written on allostasis, but
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
in the context of organic intelligence, I regret telling you that, or well, you already knew, but I regret saying that because
What, the allostasis thing?
well, when I tried to get you to talk about, well, you want to have lasagna instead of play on your instrument, you pivoted away from that example and returned to neuroscience. I'm This is a large topic that I of my challenging the epistemology of many people in the therapy field, coaching field, wellness field, because, and from an objectivist perspective of proper epistemology, induction, and Rand's razor, of the impropriety of using concepts that are not necessary for a certain context. And the example I gave, I think, is extremely important because we're dealing with real life. We're dealing with, I want to learn a musical piece. I'm passionate about music. There's a particular situation in the here and now where I'm I wrote in my calendar that I'm going to practice music for an hour, but I don't feel like practicing. Instead, I want to watch TV or have a donut or both. That is real life. That's objective. That's where the attention should go. And if you think certain concepts are necessary for making progress on real life, then bring that in, but justify why you think it's important to deal with the donut versus inbox, or TV versus.
I'm not sure why you think, or why you're arguing. And I appreciate the challenge, the epistemological challenge. This is could be great value. But I don't see why you're arguing that invoking the anterior mid-cingulate cortex is not relevant to real life, because it's part of your brain. And
Oh wait, I did not claim it was irrelevant. And if I implied it in a few minutes ago, then I'm saying that I no longer that I was wrong to imply it. I'm saying that if you're saying that's important and relevant, it's on you to show the relevance to real life.
yeah, so to
Yeah.
me, the relevance is, um, there's a concept of freedom that could be applied loosely, because I haven't hashed this out in a grad school philosophic program, but that has to do with accountability. It basically, you're free to enjoy things when you've properly accounted for their causal ramifications. That's the take what you want and pay for it, causality versus duty stuff. So if you want a donut, you're free to enjoy it, uh, from the organic spark of inspiration to the satiation you experience upon finishing it, if it fits into your value hierarchy. If it doesn't, and you start to encounter conflicts, then you have to introspect and say, okay, well, why am I experiencing all of these conflicts? Is it inevitable that emotions are always going to be conflicted, at least to some margin of error? And if they are, or if there's some level of conflict that I'm not going to accept in my motivations, how do I mediate that? And so I would say, okay, well, it turns out there's a part of your brain that rewards you when you encounter paradoxical struggle. And
Okay,
when you were going
sorry.
to say something?
I want to interrupt you, but I don't know if it's moral for me to do so.
Go
If it would
ahead.
be
I've interrupted you before.
an immoral limb worship on my part, or rational for me, I guess. But
Go ahead.
are you saying that a guy has just finished a 12-hour day at work he, he he set himself the goal of going to the gym after work. He's exhausted. He just wants a donut. And your advice is that he should reflect deeply and cognitively on his value hierarchy and the causal implications of every action option to decide whether to have the donut or go to the gym. I think that's harm to him.
It depends on if it's non-contradictory or not, and it also just depends on the context of his knowledge. So I happen to be very interested in um causal processes at like a very physical level. I mean, when I was writing music in high school, I was very, very interested about what's the physics of making this happen. It was very exciting to me. And when I was taking anatomy and physiology classes and learning about sense perception, it blew my mind that there was this point of connection between all of these ideas that seemed to be at play in all these productive ventures that would otherwise be very alienating to me. But there are plenty of people who are like, I want to be a baker, and I only want to know as much about baking as necessary in order to run a bakery, and I don't want to hear about, physics of pies. Like, there's plenty of people who have a range of detail. So that's not, and I don't think you would disagree with me on that. The question is simply where does this issue fall as it relates to your error tolerance? Like, if you're the kind of person who says that, okay, I want to do X, Y, and Z, if it varies from X, Y, and Z plus or minus this much, cool. But if you feel conflicted about it, if you're like, no, I'm a high achiever. I mean, I've seen reels about this when you doom
Okay.
scroll. Like, I've seen people say, I'm an engineer, but how long as an engineer are we going to allow our fitness to away from us? Follow me and I'll show you how to be as successful with fitness as you are in engineering. Like, I mean, it just depends on the context.
All right, let me um you seem down when I interrupt you, so I'll just
What?
you seem okay. You seem fine with my
Oh
interrupting
yeah,
you.
it's all good.
Okay, so remember when I finally got you to eat lasagna?
Yeah.
My greatest achievement in life, my greatest achievement in life is getting you is that I gave you homework which you followed, and the homework was eat some fucking lasagna. And you did. At least, well, I assume you did because you told me you did.
Yeah, I
So
wouldn't lie to
yes,
you, Doc.
you did.
Yeah, of course. I did it a couple times.
You did. Okay, so first
Yeah.
of all, so you ate lasagna. I assigned you homework. Here's your organic intelligence homework. Eat lasagna. Now, were you immoral in eating it, or and
Oh.
how did you come? Did you do a lot of thinking, like cognitive processing, to determine whether to eat the
Well,
lasagna?
no, but that
How
was
did you?
because it was a value signal that arose in an accountable context, and I wasn't using language like that when I made it was automatic, but I basically just thought the feeling it was lightning sensation that imparted this kind of meaning, to use sort of objectivist language on emotion. Was that this guy I trust, Bach, who has expertise in this realm, organic intelligence, who I reached out to because he has expertise on this realm and became friends with him on that, uh, is advising as the relevant expert to have the lasagna. But none of that was like, how would you put it? Like
Wait, were you
conscious. I just had this vibe, like that I associated with you, and it sort of enriched the ceremony of the lasagna, which touched back to the same
okay?
ceremony that I would have had eating lasagna if I was 10 years old and just I want lasagna. And that's
So okay, you've
I hope I don't like sound like a psychopath by
no,
telling
no,
you all of my
no. So you're saying that when you decided to eat lasagna, in part it was a vibe that was a summation of a lot of thoughts about I'm interested. I trust Bach. I want to
it
do
was
something.
a vibe that I trusted.
Okay, okay. But well, I appreciate that. But at the same time, I appreciate that. And now, suppose. By the way, the lasagna was pleasurable, right? I
Oh
believe
yeah,
you said it
totally,
was okay.
totally.
Nice, nice, nice.
Specifically because it touched on the same sort of joy that was available to me when I was a kid.
Nice. Yeah. I
But
mean,
the reason
if we were having a
why,
discussion right now, I would have explored that with you. But okay, go ahead. Go ahead. Yeah.
well, the only thing okay, I mean, go ahead. I could say more,
All
but
right. I'm kind of, we're both kind of like, yeah, trying
It's
to
all
cal.
good.
Um, Now later today, if you have the organic impulse to have lasagna,
Hmm.
is it a valid option to just go for it?
I mean, today I watched Batman cartoons this morning rather than watching a video on set theory. I don't know if that's the same thing, but I'm interpreting that as the same thing. And one justification
Okay.
for that was because um, you know, you're on vacation right now, so you have a lot more freedom in your schedule than you would during
Okay.
school. That's not to say that I wouldn't watch a Batman cartoon while I'm in school, but the justification might be different. It might be, well, you're not going to have the freedom the rest of the day to sort of just do something freeform associative that touches upon your childhood loves. Um, after you finish your morning coffee, because you're going to have to sit around focusing on set theory or differential equations or whatever. So it's always just an issue of allowing yourself to be in the moment, uh, in a way that is accountable to your emotional functioning as well as your intellectual functioning. I mean, as somebody who started off a musician, I am still a musician. I am very, I mean, again, a huge thing about this topic that's very interesting to me is guardrails. I'm very, very interested in enjoying a value in an emotionally authentic way because there's nothing worse than listening to a song that you can tell was hyper intellectualized and was just written to have crazy time signatures or weird harmonies, and it's not making you feel anything. And that's sort of my standard of value for everything. Like if it's violating either side of that, like if the energy associated with emotion or the energy associated with the ideas is at all obstructed, red flags start to go up. The guardrail start to.
If if I'm understanding you, if you're doing something that you don't enjoy or that is not in service of your long-term values, then you're on alert and pausing. Why am I doing this? Did I get you correctly?
I think there's a more nuanced issue at play. And I don't want to violate Rand's razor here by invoking this, but um, to me, part of the challenge in life is mediating between the energy of emotion and the energy of the intellect. Um, and uh, it's not as simple as do I eat the donut or not? There's more context associated with the physical pleasure associated with eating a donut and the joy that ought to be associated with eating a donut. Um, that could only be mediated, that context could only be properly handled if there's a clear connection between, again, the energy of emotion and the energy of the intellect.
Wait, where are you getting the premise that you should have joy when eating a donut? You could be in a bad mood or sad, having a bad day, and you eat a donut and you feel better, but you don't feel joy. Is that that was just an example of just living life, having a donut to feel better? Why do you have the premise that you should feel joy when eating a donut? Or am I misrepresenting you
I
when
mean, it's sort of like, I don't know. I mean, maybe this is a weird
I
example,
mean you
so
can't
never
choose
mind.
you
What
can't
was
choose
that?
you can't choose your emotions directly.
But I mean, okay, just to use a more clinical example, like in theory, people who are depressed describe food as not tasting the same, right? So there is a shift in experience when the mechanical sensations of pleasure are activated, but the joy that might be associated with it isn't. And so earlier I talked about um,
Mm.
the energy of the lasagna sort of high-fiving 10-year-old Roger. And
Yeah, nice. Yeah.
and like that is something I would characterize as more associated with joy rather than pleasure because um that that
Yes.
that is I mean, when you're a kid, you might not think about it that way. You would just sort of mix the two things together. Like the ceremony of going out for dinner with your family would get mixed in with the flavor of the lasagna you're eating at the Italian restaurant. But I mean, that Italian restaurant tasted really good on that day because there was so much ceremony, and that's ceremony to me is earned with freedom. It's when you've been accountable to the processes of taking what you want, paying for it. But if that becomes too intellectualized, if you're too aware of the causal levers, then it
Wait,
really
uh, uh,
depreciates the
uh,
value.
okay. So if you do what gives you pleasure and joy,
Hmm.
whatever that is, you can fill it in however, but if you do XYZ and if XYZ will give you pleasure and joy and you do XYZ and you get pleasure and joy, great. 5 stars, A plus, period, bravo. And I think you're also saying something like, and I should have that pleasure and joy only if I'm accountable in some way. And the accountability has to do with the correct causality leading to pleasure and joy. But I find that superfluous because you did X, Y, and Z and they gave you pleasure and joy, period.
I don't think that's superfluous. I think
Okay.
every value that you obtain has to exist in the context of a value hierarchy. Otherwise, we're back in the is-ought problem. Like it's just arbitrary. You have to be I mean, again, like if your behaviors, if your actions are justified in an objective way, like on an appeal to reason, on an appeal to what's rationally moral, then it has some bearing on your life. Because as objectivists, we would argue that life is the standard for morality.
Wait, so,
I mean, it's worth, I want to hear what you're going to say, but it's worth
okay.
mentioning, if it's not obvious, that that includes that the space to be able to be in the moment and completely immersed in emotion without being hyper fixated on the intellectual. Like I have to reiterate, like to me, the standard of value, the cash money, that the payoff for being so intellectual about these things is that you get to enjoy that song or that donut without sitting around, thinking about what intervals comprised of this harmony or something. I mean, you do that later, but you following? I want to hear what you were going to say, though. I just wanted to put that.
Well,
What were you going to say?
I suspect you have philosophical confusions, which I would want to sort out with you. At the same time, I am aware that we're doing this for also a general. I'm trying to aim at also a general audience. So let me just try to cut through with something. Um, the you watched Batman cartoons this morning instead of studying set theory, right? Did you say that
Yeah,
this
or
morning? Okay.
topology or some shit. Yeah,
Um, now you enjoy the Batman cartoons.
yeah. I enjoyed the topology as well, but the Batman cartoons had
Well,
a higher value yield.
right now my mind is going back to do I want to get into why I think you're philosophically what I suspect you're philosophically confused on something.
I don't know if I am, but
Well,
I'm
I know.
curious,
I would have to
just
prove
in a
it, but
selfish reason, to hear
so
why. But you got to do what you think is
so
organic.
yes, I do. Organic and rational. Um, how so did you make a judgment that watching the Batman cartoons fit within the hierarchy your hierarchy of values?
Yeah, I mean, I just vibe checked it in the same way that I
Vibe
vibe check.
check.
Yeah, this wasn't like I didn't sit down and do a
Yeah.
dissertation on it and then run out of time to watch it because I knew I had this discussion we were going to have. I just vibe checked it. Like, you know what, the hell with it. I'd rather watch
That's
Batman.
like, I mean, that's like an organic impulse check, right? Like, I'm gonna watch some Batman cartoons. My house is not burning down. I don't have a
Yeah,
test that's due in 30
sure.
minutes. So
Yeah.
there's a quick maybe it's a lightning fast reasoning process.
I mean, in the language of objectivist philosophy, it was an automatized response. And that's what emotions are,
Now,
according to objectivists.
okay, so here's a question.
Yeah.
Is anything nagging at you, or has everything been resolved? I mean, go for happiness, go for pleasure, go for values.
I mean, the things that nag at me are the basic problems of the world that aren't entirely in my control. So, I mean, I think that there's a lot of
That's why I told you to eat lasagna.
right.
Because
And like that's why I'm interested in the organic intelligence
okay,
thing
okay.
because,
Yeah, yeah,
well, I mean, I want to reiterate, like,
yeah.
to me, there are challenges in the world with everything that anybody would want to accomplish. So I want to be a scientist, but we have this issue where the resolution between empiricism and rationalism is not at all resolved. And so you encounter all sorts of explanations, including about set theory, that have no point of connection between ideas and no point of connection between the ideas and reality. And
I
yet
agree.
we still are made responsible for a boatload of crap that will be penalized for if we don't somehow account for it. Anyway, so I mean, these are the things, typical existential crap that
Yeah,
any
yeah.
professional would be worried about. And organic intelligence to me um, is about how you increase your capacity to deal with these challenges and how you, contrary to the tiger mom or the utilitarian, make an asset out of pleasure rather than like a liability out of it. And
Yes. May I add to that? Yes, thank you. And I would like to add for those people who are watching or listening and who are very new to organic intelligence, I wanted to say something to that audience. So far in my discussion of pleasure with Roger, it may have come across as that organic intelligence is just saying, well, make sure to, fill your life with pleasure. It is saying that, and that's an important thing. It's not a trivial thing. And it's saying something much bigger, which is that according to organic intelligence, your biology has the potential and in certain conditions a tendency towards increasing its capacity to process information and intensity easily. It has that capacity, that potential. That potential gets actualized when and to the extent your biology is in two conditions. The first condition is orientation, the second condition is pleasure. When these two conditions are stable, the biology goes through cycles of arousal and de-arousal that reach specific levels of intensity set by your biology that are called organic intensity thresholds. When the biology is able to reach these organic intensity thresholds and fully rest from them, capacity increases. The biology levels up in its ability to process information and intensity. That was very dense, and I have hundreds of videos and Substack posts on it. I just wanted to name that for people who are new to organic intelligence. It's
I thought that
not
was
just
really well
saying,
spoken.
thank you. It's not just saying, don't forget to enjoy life and pleasure's good. Don't Joel Sargent yourself to death, enjoy some lasagna. It is saying that I gave Roger the homework, my client better eat lasagna or I'm terminating you. Yes, and he enjoyed lasagna and it's good. And there's the profound value is capacity, which I just wanted to say that for people who are new. Okay. So where were you or where are we with yes, okay, yes. So uh, uh, um most people can do not have the capacity to question their fundamental beliefs. It's too alarming. If you have a deep belief in God, if you have a deep belief in this God over that God or this religion over that religion, if you're a diehard Republican, diehard Democrat, diehard whatever, whatever your beliefs are, for many people, they don't have the capacity to actually assess them. It's too alarming.
Can I
And
ask
so
you?
let me just so a major value of capacity increase is that you gain capacity to start thinking, about deep matters that may have profound implications on your well-being. Okay, go ahead, Roger. Yeah.
It's more just exploring a cue here, and it might not be worth spending too much time hashing out, but it might be. What because that's so abstract a generalization, most people have a hard time challenging their fundamental beliefs or something. Um,
Okay.
I just mean in the sense that it's including a lot of elements in the category. Most people,
Yeah, yeah,
that's what I
yeah,
mean by abstract. It's far reaching.
yeah.
Um, so I would be curious to know what the observable evidence would be as you judge whether or not you yourself or you're dealing with somebody who lacks the capacity to even question their own fundamental beliefs, because that would mean at some level their capacity of reasoning is quite handicapped.
Oh,
So that might be really, I mean, I think that would be fascinating to know. How would, what would qualify as evidence for that?
okay.
'Cause that gets into like the crow epistemology, that gets into
Yes.
like bandwidth, like
I
emotional capacity, like in the same
I
con
think
emotional crow. It's the thing I made up.
I appreciate what you just said because I think what I said was just wrong. And I think you've
Oh,
pointed that out. I think you've so what I said was most people don't have the capacity to challenge their fundamental beliefs. I think that's okay. I think I'm wrong.
oh,
I
okay.
think that's wrong. Um, most people don't do it. They they have the capacity to do it. They have the potential to do it in the sense that they have the potential or capacity to do many things: quit fentanyl, leave an abusive relationship, climb Mount Everest, get an Olympic medal. I mean, there are things in life that are very difficult and challenging to do, but it's in your capacity to do it. Okay, okay. So when I said most people don't have the capacity, I meant they don't have the capacity to do it comfortably. And the fact that it's uncomfortable to do tends to reinforce not doing it, even in many cases in which they genuinely try to do so, which is why developing capacity in the organic intelligence sense is so crucial.
Can you say that again? I didn't
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
follow
yeah,
that.
yeah. Damn it. No, you're right. You're right. No, I appreciate you very much right now because you're supporting me in being honest and objective.
Oh, I'm
Um,
glad.
so most people, okay, people have the ability to think, to turn on their minds, and to question their beliefs. And it's very uncomfortable to do so. So you have a gay guy, he was raised Muslim or Christian, and he was, being gay is wrong, you're going to go to hell. He has the potential, the capacity to start questioning his beliefs, and it may be extremely difficult to do so. Um, so you could just say, well, you just got to do it. Drill Sergeant Goggins, you just got to, do what's uncomfortable. Do, effort, 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 willpower. Just question your beliefs, question God, question, is being gay really wrong? And uh, okay, you could do that, but there's a danger in many cases that that just reinforces high intensity, reinforces the discomfort, and reinforces the status quo of him believing that he's gay and going to hell. So I think a major reason why I'm so into organic intelligence is that it increases the chances dramatically of follow through with thinking, especially about fundamental matters, because we're increasing the capacity to process information and intensity comfortably so
Um,
that people are less likely to get locked into whatever they happen to believe, or they get locked into emotional debates about politics that go nowhere. That's much less likely if you have more capacity. Okay, go ahead.
it was worth mentioning that many of the issues of the drill sergeant or the just do it stuff that I bring up are about exploring what seems to me a kind of stolen valor. Um, and because when you say just do it, you're assuming that it's obvious. So why are you talking about this still? But the example I gave with the drumstick was like, it certainly wasn't obvious. If it was obvious, then everybody could play Tom Sawyer by Rush. But it takes a lot of work to develop the skill to play that song. All the classical or jazz musicians in the audience might scoff and say, amateur stuff anyway, but it doesn't make a difference. The point is that when people say just do it, it's a cop out. When the intrinsicist just says to hell with any method by which knowledge or skill is developed, you just do the knowledge or the skill, um, just cause it's basically confessing that they don't know why they know what they know, if they in fact do know it, and they don't, as a result, know how to transfer it or don't want to. And
Yep.
so some of these issues that you're bringing up, everything from leaving an abusive relationship, climbing Mount Everest, or resolving um, other stuff, I think are a bit more technical than we give them credit for. And I've found that technicality can be like if it's done correctly, should be clarifying as opposed to ambiguating, the confusing. And
Yeah.
so um, um, when you talk about like okay, so like the thing that I brought up earlier, I don't know if I actually came. I mean, I feel like I came up with this, but I'm sure it's not that mind-blowing of a concept. I'm sure somebody else has. But in the same sense that there's a crow epistemology, well, we could, if anybody's not familiar with that, we only take in a certain amount of units of attention, and at some point, it's not even that numerous. It's like seven. But what separates us from the animals is how we economize that and are able to generalize. And neuroscience actually supports this. There was an actual anyway. So there's also an emotional crow. Like you could only take in so much emotion and process so much conflict or whatever as you handle these issues. Um, and I'm not a psychologist, so I don't know how to mediate that. But if supposing there was some kind of emotional crow, like you could only challenge your deep premises so far before you become emotionally compromised and unable to think about it anymore. Um, if you were a highly responsible person who is not a psychologist, you might start lashing yourself for being a bad person. And anybody who is not shredded but wants to get shredded would be prone to feeling that way if they had that kind of psychology and no concept of an emotional limit. Because it's like, well, if you have free will, why aren't you shredded? Um,
I
so
agree completely.
right. So when we talk about increasing capacity, like again, I'm shopping here. I'm not an expert in organic intelligence, but capacity is like a metaphysical notion, like an idea of like what effects are you capable of delivering, invoking an emotional crow as much as you might invoke a technical, crow, like how many units can you take in, becomes really relevant, which is why I was curious about why you were talking about people who lack the capacity to really reason about their fundamental premises. But
Yeah.
I want to I want to reiterate that a lot of it is, I mean, it should be clarifying in that it's really much more technical and less personal than it might feel. Like if you adopt the right technique, you might be able to do a lot more, either intellectually, emotionally, or physically than you might think. And
And
oh, that's more or
and
less what I was
organic.
saying.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I mean, I could keep going, but like that, no, I more or less said everything I could throw at it.
Organic intelligence has provided the two techniques. They are number one, orientation, number two, pleasure.
So that's the hot take. That's the controversy. That's what's something that I think just in the big picture anybody could benefit from because you 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 live in a world with scarce resources, including time and a growing expectation to not only just specialize but generalize, as you know, AI and automation, all that kind of stuff. And there's a lot of skills that you might want to develop, like baking pies, but there's a lot of facets about making a living out of that are complicating, and thus again why
Yeah.
any way you could breadcrumb the struggle, any way that you could introduce a positive, you know, a carrot associated with some
Well,
stick, I would imagine would, I mean, according to the organic intelligence model of ability, which is a term I'm making up, um, it would improve your chances of developing a skill in that regard. Like in other words, pleasure and discipline shouldn't be antagonists.
yeah, I mean, the more so the practice of orientation and pleasure stabilize orientation and pleasure in your biology over time. And the more stable and attuned you are to pleasure, the more you can pay attention, the more you'll have natural interests. I'm interested in music. I'm interested in this and that and the other thing. And the more you'll be able to follow through in pursuing them pleasurably, and the more you'll be able to find pleasurable or less unpleasant ways to do things. So fundamentally, orientation and pleasure enable you to follow your interests, identify values, think about what's realistic in the world without emotional overwhelm, and pursue as comfortably as possible and to troubleshoot what's unpleasant by finding a less unpleasant way to do it or making a judgment. Okay, I'm not willing to go through medical school and this and that and the other thing just to be a doctor. So I'm going to pivot to something else. And I'll be able to pivot pretty quickly and easily because I have orientation on board. I won't have a lot of demons following me as I explore other interests.
Hmm. I have thoughts and responses to that. I don't know
No,
what your time
I'm
frame
good.
is.
I'll keep going.
So I'm not sure if this is of general interest. Again, this is sort of where my mind is hovering on this topic, but there are two ways that what Huberman describes as the stress as enhancing mindset kind of comes up in this context. One of them is new, just based on having this discussion with you. The other one is old. Um, but uh, they're both of interest to anybody who sees comfort and pleasure as an asset as against a liability. And again, kind of keeping an idea like of this sense of like a pleasure as a kind of guardrail rather than as something that will seduce you into self-destruction. Which again is as much of a hot take in a specialized sense. The organic intelligence thesis is a hot take in the same way that saying selfishness is a virtue is a hot take. And so I guess it
Nice.
I guess it would make sense that once it hashes out at this level of granular resolution, that it, you know, if you say that selfishness is a virtue, you're naturally going to conclude that pleasure is an asset. Um, so it's a long process of getting there, but so okay, with all of that front-loaded, unnecessary context front-loaded, um, for
May I,
me,
may I interrupt very quickly?
okay,
I want to
it
say,
was
oh,
going to get to something, but what were you going to say?
a quick side to specifically the organic intelligence audience. Uh, Ayn Rand is pro-selfish and means by it the pursuit of your happiness, and she thinks the word selfishness is straw manned by many people. And one sign of this is this example. I was so selfish. I spent all my life savings at the casino and destroyed my life and the lives of my wife and kids. I was so selfish. Notice how decoupled selfishness is in that example with happiness, joy, pleasure in life. Selfishness is associated with suffering and pain, and that's one of the worst injustices to that concept. So one of Rand's radical positions, which I'm in favor of, and I assume Roger is, is that we need to salvage the concept of selfishness, understand it correctly, connect it with joy, pleasure, and happiness, not with suffering and pain. I just want to mention that to the organic intelligence audience. So, it, selfishness is a big sell, and pleasure. Selfishness is a big sell to the culture that objectivism is trying to do, Ayn Rand is trying to do, we're trying to do, and pleasure is the big sell to the culture as organic intelligence is trying to do. Okay, sorry for that interruption.
Okay.
It felt
It's
important.
also worth mentioning, and I hope you don't see this as taking away from your point, that um, Rand went to an extensive made a great effort to make the argument that the moral is the practical.
Yeah.
So that would mean that if the pleasure ought to also be practical. But okay, so anyway, what I was going to touch on earlier was, and I hope this is of general interest, that somebody who's passionate about baking who wants to be a baker might discover if they read this book called The E-Myth that um, ever since McDonald's was a thing, you're not in the business of making hamburgers or making pies, you're in the real estate business, and that might make them want to stab their eyes out. I don't know if everybody's familiar with this, but the general idea is that the process of making a living is not about the thing you're passionate about selling. It's about having a commodity that's scalable. And that could be kind of soul sucking to a naive. I don't mean naive as in stupid, just like as a regular person who's going about their day, learns a skill and realizes that the way that that skill is allocated in an economic and setting or compensated isn't exactly how you might expect it to. So this is sort of where I think an issue of of um of accountability becomes really important, because if you're really passionate about pies and you want to go the distance, or you're really passionate about helping people and you want to be a doctor and go the distance, a question you should be asking yourself when you first discover that, okay, I had this organic love of something like making pies or helping people, and then I found that there are complicating factors. If you're really in love with that thing because it was pleasurable and joyous, you would ask yourself, well, how do I shoehorn in the original passion into the business of being a professional baker,
Yeah.
or am I going to just let them hijack that from me? And is there a way to be rational about this question? Is there a way to say, I realize there are complicating factors in being a doctor, but this still is about helping people, no matter how much, complication goes into it. McDonald's still has to have good hamburgers. I mean, if you're into that kind of hamburger, in order for it to be profitable. So you have to ask these real questions, and that's sort of where, in my view, decision paralysis, particularly in the context of the just do it mentality, comes up. So when you start increasing capacity for pleasure, what you're really doing, insofar as you're being rational, is you're extending your ability to experience pleasure and joy such that you could defer gratification without extended periods of misery as you're doing it. Because again, there's an emotional crow. There's some kind of bandwidth limit you're going to hit if you're working against yourself 100%. And um, so to me, the moral as the practical, which includes pleasure as an asset as against a liability, has to
Yeah.
always
Yeah.
be contrasted with the Tiger Mom version of this. Of if you want to do X, Y, and Z because you love baking and you want to do baking, there's going to be some guy who was, trained in Soviet Russia to be the best baker in the history of mankind since he was a baby, and they do it in a militaristic, dogmatic Tiger Mom way, and you're going to have to compete with them. And then there's also going to be, complicating factors like if you want to make hamburgers, McDonald's is about the real estate business. I'm quoting a movie if everybody's at least heard of or seen that movie. But anyway, so I don't know, like all of this stuff, these kind of complicating factors, um, become relevant. I mentioned like there are two things that kind of I would think about in the context of pleasure as practical, in the context of what Huberman was talking about with the stress as enhancing mindset. But again, that's kind of a wide scope of discussion, so I'm not sure how deep do you want to probe
Okay.
that.
I could see some people thinking here, yes, the idea of finding a pleasurable way to pursue what's important to you sounds great, but that just sounds like just do it. Just find a way to make it pleasurable. How the hell do you do that? And organic intelligence would say that's why the fundamental is orientation, not pleasure. I mean, the two fundamentals are orientation and pleasure, but orientation is the fundamental within those two. You have to first practice connecting your senses to the environment, which settles intensity so that you can experience what low intensity pleasure is like. First, gain access to that. And to the extent you can be in states of orientation, you're more likely to get ideas that you could not predict beforehand about how to find less unpleasant ways to do what you need to do. So there is an answer. So to the people who just don't think very deeply about practical living and just say, just do it, just do the chores, just do the budgeting, just do the unpleasant thing for 5 years and then move on. The danger of that is you're going to miss out on pleasure and you're going to habituate your soul to be in suffering as opposed to being in comfort. So there's a huge danger in just do it. Now, if these people are sold on finding a pleasurable way and their reaction is, fine, I'm willing to buy in that pleasure is the way, but how the hell do I do that? Aren't you just saying just do it to the pleasure? Then we would say just fo- first focus on orientation. And if someone says, but what if I can't orient? The reply by organic intelligence is orientation is always online to some degree. If you can hear and see us right now, there's some orientation happening. It's a natural process of the biology moment to moment. And we're just leaning in the direction of orientation, noticing orientation over time. And as that gets built up, intensity in pain, including painful emotion, dies down. And that's when you can learn what low intensity pleasure feels like, a base of comfort, which is at the same time a base of unpredictable generative ideas about how to find pleasurable ways to do things that used to be unpleasurable. Okay. All right.
This might be a good time to bring up then the connection between stress and orientation, but also if we could afford a third dimension to that
Yeah.
analysis, um, stress, orientation. So, I just picture that, you come home from school one day because you realize exactly how much thought needs to go into planning for college or whatever when you're a kid, or you realize how much planning has to go into a corporate job as against an entrepreneur, whatever. You have a lot of decisions to make. And I could just imagine you sit down and you orient, and now suddenly all of that's gone, and you're just looking at, the green wall in your room or the white wall in your room, and you're practicing mindfulness, and then you feel better until you realize that you haven't solved anything. And so then the question is, how do you analyze this stuff in a way to where um, you're in a position to negotiate? Because when you're stressed, um, part of the issue of being stressed is there's this sense of there's a bunch of stuff I don't want to do that I kind of have to do. And
Mm.
that's corrupting my ability to even make sense out of this process. Um, and so again, that's sort of like what I'm interested in here is you mentioned intensity, right? So I think I'm not sure. I think stress would be a kind of intensity. Um,
Yeah, unpleasant intensity.
yeah. So, um,
Um, it can also be
well,
pleasant, but our main concern is unpleasant intensity, right?
yeah. And if we're sitting around talking about pleasure is practical, at least to me, the ultimate question that I would be asking, feeling like I'm put in a position to negotiate suddenly is like, okay, you, the expert, are saying that um, you're telling me that the morals, the practical, and pleasure is an asset, and all this kind of stuff. That I have capacity and orientation and all this stuff. How do I? how do I find pleasure in the stress? How do I actually take these things that are apparently assets and use them to defeat the obstacles? And am I even in a position to do that? Or is it really just like,
Yeah,
sorry,
yeah.
kid, at some level, there's going to be a fair bit of walking around Legos barefoot and you just got to deal with it.
So yeah, whatever level of suffering you're go you any individual is going through normally in life, that's just the assumed law of the land. You'll just keep going that way until something changes. So you practice and notice orientation to the extent possible. It could be I looked at my wall for 2 seconds and then I couldn't anymore because I had the thought, this is a complete waste of time. This is BS. I'm gonna go back to my suffering and doom scrolling and thinking about how I'm just doomed in life. Okay, but you got 2 seconds in.
Well,
So
doom scrolling arguably would
yeah,
be a way of
sorry. I
creating
didn't
an orientation, but go ahead.
actually no, yeah, yeah. Oh, nice. First of all, Roger, nice. And you deserve a lasagna. Yeah, so when you're doom scrolling, whatever you're doing, enjoy whatever there is to enjoy about it. So if you're a troll and you like, you know, going onto my channel and making fun of me and making fun of Ayn Rand, I don't love that. But if you're gonna do it, there must be some joy you're getting from being a troll. So enjoy it. Whatever you do, get what enjoyment you can about it. At the same time, if you don't have orientation on board, that's always the priority. So you use enjoyment to pivot to orientation. Okay,
But I
I'm doing
think the examples you just brought up made me think that okay, but the orientation can't be orientation to something short term. It has to be a long range orientation. Is that a thing? Is there such thing as long range orientation? Because
wait.
I could explain that a little bit,
Okay,
but
okay, sorry. Yeah.
because like to me, you look at the doom scrolling stuff and you see the existential penguin who goes up the mountain. I don't know if everybody's seen that meme that's recently viral. Um, maybe that's just my algorithm and I've just outed myself as obsessed with penguins or something. But anyway, there's a sense of connection that's sort of shoehorned in by doom scrolling, and it's a sort of like generalizable awareness that you're experiencing. And again, I'm not thinking about this in a dissertation. It's more of like I vibe checked it. But if I were to extrapolate or unzip that file here and ask myself, all right, but why am I so captured by the doom scroll and not captured by staring at the wall like you know like the Kingpin is in Daredevil? The reason why I would be doom scrolling is like there's a sense of connection. A lot of the memes and irreverent humor on there um, captures the sort of societal connection that I wish I could count on. And again, the sort of counting on something, I could count on X, Y, or Z to pan out. That's freedom. You're free to stare at the wall and enjoy it because it's persistent. You're free to doom scroll because you could count on that to always be there. And that to me is where orientation is in a long range way facilitates pleasure because
That was
you're safe to, in other words.
that was beautiful.
Oh, well, thank you.
That was beautiful.
I'm a poet.
That was
Not really.
beautiful. You're a
Thank you.
poet. Orientation is freedom. Orientation is attentional freedom. Or you could say attentional control, same thing. Whatever is happening, you can easily and automatically and effortlessly let your senses connect to the environment. That is freedom. That is attentional freedom and control. And that is the base. That is being able to to get a little bit into objectivism. That is foundational to control over focus, over the directing of attention, over the ability to be objective, to identify what is it. This is what it is, and I'm not distracted by a thousand intense associations about it. That clown is that clown. It's different from the one that attacked me when I was 5. That tree is that tree. yes, my ex-girlfriend dumped me at that tree, but right now I'm just seeing the tree as a tree.
So,
That's
okay, what you said there, I'm interrupting because I got excited.
that's
So
fine.
okay, you said that's fine, so I'm gonna keep going. Um, so there's a technical aspect. You're able to differentiate some such thing that exists as a thing, a particular kind of thing that exists that's a clown, and you're able to distinguish it from maybe negative associations. Um, and okay, so there's a fact-based orientation that's occurring, but then there's also a value-based orientation that's occurring, where you're sort of decoupling negative associations between two things that on the surface seem alike. They're both trees, but one was the location of getting dumped, whereas this tree is something that I could enjoy as in the present in the same way that I might enjoy doom scrolling.
Hmm.
Um, but and this is the part where it might be misinterpreted as over intellectualizing, but um, I think part of my thesis is apparently that when when you are able to vibe check something, when you are able to enjoy the tree rather than seeing it as something that reminds you of the type of place where you got dumped, um, it's again because it's not just a tree, it's a universalizable tree. It's like the universal tree. There's something relatable to translate that from weird philosophical jargon to there's something relatable about it. Again, when you doom scroll, there's something very relatable about something that captures your attention. That's why it's capturing your attention. And
Hmm.
the danger here is that you don't want to uh, take organic intelligence or any other thing like that and make it utilitarian in the sense that it's only good because you get to defeat the tiger mom. But in some other sense, the moral is the practical. So I'm thinking of, again, this is sort of deep lore here, but if anybody watching is an objectivist and they've seen the lecture Understanding Objectivism by Leonard Peikoff, he talks about at one point facts and theories ought to have like a sort of vividness that the theory about stepping on a train track, ought to be avoided. And he
Yes.
goes on to make the argument that I'm not saying that emotions are tools of cognition. He says they are tools of retaining cognitions. And
Yeah.
so, I mean, to me, that's basically in line with organic intelligence that when you orient to the environment, supposedly there are cognitions that have occurred in your life already that you're reorienting to. And again, it can't be counterfeit and like hyper intellectualized. There's nothing wrong with explicit reasoning, but that's just not every aspect of life. And so sometimes you need to be able to vibe check something. You might just tap it, immerse yourself. And that's again to me what the orientation is. Like you are reorienting to this is what life is about. Like this tree is what life is about. And you're not thinking about that explicitly, but you are immersed in the sort of relatable act of observing nature. That's why they say go touch grass. Like, you know what I mean?
Yes. This tree is what life is about. It's poetic. What does it mean exactly? Could you
Yeah, I
elaborate?
mean, I have a whole sort of heuristic or running theory about this that I'm about to say. Again, I'm not an expert in any of these fields, just a guy who's found himself needing to ask questions that I'm about to provide answers to, I guess, that were sufficient for me. But I think there are different levels of perception. Like I said before, you could say that is a tree, or you could say that is the place where I got dumped. One is saying what something is, the other is saying a value ramification of that thing.
Mm.
But then there's another layer on top of that, which is the aesthetic level of perception, where you don't just perceive what something is or whether it was good based on some calculus.
Yeah.
It represents or it encodes some meaning to you, like as an
Yes.
archetype,
Yes.
and it's a symbol of something. So, like I mentioned earlier, like getting shredded or something. So it's a symbol of being
That's
accountable, being responsible, being competent. Being shredded is, but because it's only an aesthetic thing, if you were to take that archetype being shredded as the only instance which could be considered to be in shape, you'd have a problem because you're confusing what it represents for what's representative, the symbol for the symbolized.
Okay.
So
Hmm.
maybe I made that a little more confusing than it is, or maybe I sound very Jordan Peterson-y right now. But the point is that when you appreciate the aesthetics of something, you're tapping into some meaning in a way that
Yes. May I just
go
take
ahead, yeah.
take the baton? You mentioned that we're talking about the glories of orientation. You pointed out is freedom. Yes. And then you suggested when you orient, there's value orientation. I want to pick up on that point. Yes. An idea in organic intelligence is that when we orient, and to the degree we are oriented, meaning the attention is actually connected to the environment as opposed to hostage by interior intensity, um, your attention will tend to go to something positively significant for you. Super simple example, kid enters a candy store, he looks around, he goes to the candy that interests him. Another example, you're looking at a catalog of majors, your attention goes to the one that is interesting to you. You're at a party, your attention goes to people who are interesting to your attention. So when we're oriented, we're more likely to pick out what is positively attractive to us and good for us. And what and um one form this can take is something called outsight in organic intelligence, which is organic outsight is organic intelligence's term for projection. Projection refers to the placing of interior experience that's uncomfortable for you onto other people. You're the one who's gay, not me. You're the one who's having an affair, not me. But in organic intelligence, um, there's a positive, very positive value of projection. It's desirable, and to remove it from negative connotation, it's called outsight. Orientation primes outsight. And this is maybe getting really complicated, but for
No,
example,
I'm I'm
okay, you follow.
I'm,
Okay, yeah,
I'm
no,
totally
I meant for this for some members of the
my
audience.
interest is piqued.
Yeah, good. But so let's say a person is at the beach looking at the surfers surfing waves, and then and then and then he thinks, wow, they must feel so free and not imprisoned by work and relationships. And then let's say their friend who's a psychotherapist says, actually, you're projecting, you're the one who feels imprisoned by work and relationships. You're just projecting that onto the surfers. For all you know, the surfers maybe feel imprisoned in relationships, so you should really monitor yourself for cognitive distortions. So a psychotherapist may say that from an organic intelligence perspective, no, 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 no. Enjoy the orientation, enjoy looking at the waves, enjoy looking at the surfers. Yes, you may have your own issues with feeling imprisoned in relationships and work. And through orientation, your biology is making progress on these issues in in pleasure, in comfort, because you're enjoying looking at the waves, enjoying looking at the surfers. You're having thoughts about they must feel so free, and so you have some pleasurable access to a feeling of freedom, a feeling of wanting to get out of prison, a feeling of wanting pleasure and freedom in relationships and work, as opposed to feeling pain and imprisonment. So your biology is moving in that direction through simple orientation, as opposed to high effort, intense cognition on yourself about, oh, let me analyze myself and my relationships and my work and my feelings of imprisonment, which may just reinforce high intense pain, especially when you're disoriented. So orientation is the way to pleasurable, sustainable, wholesome, pro-life cognition through outsight, through orientation, as a way to gain insight that is pleasurable and sustainable. So there's a lot to orientation that's deep in organic intelligence. I don't talk about it a lot because I try to stay at more fundamental things for like a DIY general audience. But since we're there, a major value of orientation is value orientation, as you suggested, And a major aspect of that is the outside process.
So, I
Being
mean, there's
okay,
a lot of things that come to mind with that. First of all, relevance as a concept to me has always been very compelling and struck me as like a huge feedback mechanism as far as being objective, despite feeling very nebulous. And you might be thinking, why the hell am I talking about relevance? But that was just one concept that came to mind. Another thing that comes to mind is you talked about the psychotherapist well actually in you when you start talking about it looks like these surfers are so free, and he's like, well, actually you're just projecting and all this
yeah,
stuff. And so, I mean, again, I'm making some leaps here, but there's a sort of there's a sort of, I mean, there's a real factual question as to whether or not are these surfers actually happy and experiencing freedom in the way that I'm perceiving them? And supposing that not all surfers are free because we, like not all, what do you call it? Not all I can't, swans are white or whatever. Um, that's how the psychotherapist might get a well actually in on you. But I would also make the case that there's an aesthetic perception to the freedom of the surfer. I mean, that's part of the archetype. And there's been, movies about this and the movie Endless Summer. And so there are some sort of like
yeah,
enduring values that characterize the zeitgeist or the frame of reference that's available to your consciousness. So the real problem with the well actually from the psychotherapist is a kind of like subjectivism. He's basically saying, surely not enough surfers are happy that you could see it as a symbol of happiness. You really just need to decide to be happy, which is kind of a really perverse um, version of just do it. I mean that is popular with certain crowds. I think Elon Musk talked about on a on a that Twitter post, Twitter being the height of sophistication, I guess, being sarcastic, that, being happy is a decision. And I don't think that's true. Like, I think you decide how to allocate your energy, whether it's to the surfer or to whatever else, but you don't decide whether that's like a symbol of freedom. Like, I mean, because that would be counterfeiting the archetype. You're not being genuine anymore. If it's an earned aesthetic, like if it's an earned symbol, I mean, to me, the value would be to explore to whatever extent somebody has achieved that freedom. How do
yeah.
I reproduce that? And not in like some counterfeit way where you just kind of decide to maybe say
Yes,
something.
yeah, yes. I would like to say, and pleasure is important. Pleasure being the second fundamental of organic intelligence, orientation and pleasure. I wanted to show how it's relevant here. Orientation to the surfers and the waves, pleasurable. So do it. You have the thoughts, they must feel so free, and that's pleasurable. So enjoy the thoughts. That's more important right now than trying to figure out whether they're true or false or supported by evidence or not. There's an archetype of surfers being connected to freedom. Is that enjoyable? Go for it. So what's it, an essential in the experience of orienting to the surfers and having thoughts is pleasure. These are the breadcrumbs that lead you towards capacity growth and towards insight and towards values.
So, okay, I mean, a question I was going to ask about this, and this sort of ties back to the original entry point into this discussion where I said something like, I see organic as sort of a far-reaching concept that even could be relatable to some like free market economics, where you don't want to
Yeah,
distort the price mechanism by introducing controls, and therefore, in an ironic attempt to avoid scarcity and thereby ensure that you have shortages.
yeah,
Um, so okay, the analog to a moral individual and their life might not be particularly clear because from the free market economic perspective, you would say, all right, well, when you violate an individual's rights by introducing force into a otherwise voluntary arrangement, you distort the price mechanism, blah, 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 blah. So I mean, it's not a perfect analogy because if you talk about when do you introduce controls into your own life? You're not actually pointing a gun at yourself, and nobody is likely pointing a gun at you. The question about so it becomes an issue of how do you conceptualize this objectively without like making a false package deal, in other words. But so okay, you said something about the breadcrumbs and being related to the pleasure and all of that kind of stuff. But it sounds to me like what you're saying is pleasure is functioning as a signal to some sort of actionable process that would be accountable. You for the effort that you put in, you would be reciprocated. At least that's what your biology is telling you. Uh, and it's not saying literally to become a surfer, but it might be say do something that the surfing represents to you in your life.
Something good for you is happening and is pointing you towards value.
And one other thing I wanted to throw out
And
there,
and
just
that
in
would be
the
said
name
by
of
both objectivism and organic intelligence.
one other thing I wanted to throw out there in the name of being organic and a total wins worshiper, is I'm just kidding about that last part. Is I mean I've also heard about the concept of this is totally a field, so forgive me, but I always wanted to ask you about this if you had heard of it. I don't remember if I did. There's a concept called affordances, by this psychologist named J.J. Gibson,
Yeah.
and we don't have to dive into that here, but it's always I've always thought of um that as being also very related to organic intelligence implicitly because there's a certain like when I described the word call to action, I had a hard time not using the word affordance. Like if you see something as like you look at the ocean, you see it as surfable, like you or whatever, like that's how you when I think about like increasing your capacity, I think about doing the sorts of things that kind of call to you a particular kind of action. And so, if we were to
Yeah. Yeah.
interrupt me if I'm getting way off here,
Well,
but
um, I'm interested in talking about this, but perhaps in the future,
yeah, we don't,
as I'm wanting to close out now,
sure.
I will say J.J. Gibson on perception, and we've talked about affordances before,
Oh, okay, okay.
and in several sessions, and um, I'm interested in continuing on that, and also you've mentioned the free market as an analogy to organic intelligence, and that has interested me very, very much. I thought about it myself, and there's one video, I believe only one video. Well, there is a video on YouTube somewhere, not mine, where okay, so the free market economics, uh, Austrian economics is an approach to economics within the free market tradition. And allostasis, the field of allostasis, is a theoretical background for organic intelligence. And there's a video where this woman uh, is, is 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 talking about allostasis and Austrian economics
Oh,
and
wow.
thinks there are connections. And it was a very interesting video. And so this is something that I would be interested in talking to you about
Yeah,
further, exploring further. So um now to close out, because we went in so many places and it's been a long conversation, I don't have wonderful closeout comments right now. I'll think in the moment as we go along, but are there any thoughts you have by way of general closing out or general
yeah. No,
reflections?
I just think that I think that the through line here is that you want to use your mind to explore the environment, the world, for values, and you want pleasure to be an asset in that rather than a liability. Uh, and to me,
Yeah.
the far-reaching concept of organic promises to be helpful in that, because it's easy to fall into the Tiger Mom universe,
Hmm.
which turns everything into a dichotomy of either you're comfortable and broke and dependent, or you're, successful and miserable. And
Is is shopping for values from Gene Maroney, or did you come up with that? Where'd you get it?
I think I mean, it's not that original. I think at one point I heard from ARI describe Ayn Rand as a valuer. It might
Oh
have been
yes.
on Cargate.
Yeah, may I say, because that phrase for me pings orientation. I imagine shopping, like shopping in a supermarket, shopping in a mall. That's very, or you're here, you're seeing, you're hearing. There's orientation to values, shopping for values. It's a very orientation friendly phrase, shopping
Okay, well, I'm
for
glad.
values. Yeah. Um, I would say thank you, Roger, for your following up and for this intellectually stimulating and enjoyable conversation. Following up my chat with Gene Maroney. Thank you again, Gene. Hi, Gene. And exploring this bridge between objectivism and organic intelligence.
Yeah,
Uh,
thank you for having me. Thank you for posting interesting content, for collaborating with Gene on that, and for advising me to eat lasagna. Most importantly,
yeah,
um, no, and thanks for inviting me on. This has been really fun.
thank you. And thank you for pinging the lasagna.
Hell yeah.
Thank you.